السنة مثل سفينة نوح من ركبها نجا ومن تركها غرق.
So giving a summary of the previous lesson related to the topic of restricted blind following, there are 17 points in which I summarized last week's lesson. The first point is that the Shaykh Rahimahullah, he said that the four famous fiqh madhabs are in agreement that the principles of the Sharia are four: Quran, Hadith, Ijma, and Qiyas. The second point is that the method adopted in implementing these principles of the Sharia is as follows, categorically. First, you refer to the Quran, and then you refer to the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and then Ijma, and then Qiyas. Don't forget that Qiyas is something which is disputed amongst the scholars. But when the Shaykh is mentioning these points, he's mentioning them on the basis of the four famous madhabs who accept these principles. The third point is that sciences or ulum such as nahwa, syntax of the Arabic language, sarf, which is etymology of the Arabic language, ilm al-ma'ani, which is semantics of the Arabic language, usul al-fiqh, and all the different disciplines that can be found. These disciplines have been introduced and have been documented and have been written by the scholars as a means to understand the Quran and Hadith. So all these different disciplines that we learn, whether it's nahwa, sarf, whether it's usul, that in reality we learn these different sciences so that they aid us to understand Quran and Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The fourth point which the Shaykh mentioned is that when there is an issue which cannot be found in the Quran and Sunnah directly or explicitly, then Ijma is adopted, or we refer to Ijma to see what the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in at that time, what they agreed upon. The fifth point is that if there is no Ijma that can be found on that issue, then the mujtahid, the qualified scholar, will either make ijtihad or he will either make qiyas. Ijtihad is accepted by all and qiyas is disputed by many. The fifth point of the summary of the previous lesson is that the Shaykh mentions that not all the scholars have accepted Ijma and Qiyas as two independent sources and principles of the Sharia. Those who don't accept Ijma, they say that they don't accept Ijma on the basis that they say that Ijma is not possible after the companions Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. And they say that accepting Qiyas analogy of a mujtahid is something which has been disputed by many scholars of the past and has not been accepted from amongst the principles of the Sharia. Like I said, that al-Hadith, the Madhhab of al-Hadith is that they accept unanimously without any dispute that a mujtahid can make ijtihad based upon the Quran and the Sunnah if there is no explicit evidence in the Quran or Sunnah, but they have disputed when it comes to Qiyas analogy. Details of this dispute can be found in Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafa al Amritsarī rahimahullah risala known as Ijtihad wa Taqlīd wa Salafi. He wrote a risala called Ijtihad wa Taqlīd wa Salafi, which is a refutation of the famous Deobandi scholar Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi and his book, who wrote a book trying to prove that it is wajib or obligatory to make Taqlid or blind follow. The seventh point is that the issue of blind following between the Ahlul Hadith and the Muqallidun, or the blind followers, or the Madhabists, is a fundamental issue. And the criteria for these two madhabs, that which separates the Ahlul Hadith from the Madhabists, those who advocate and support blind following, the landmark issue is at-Taqlid. So anybody who says that this issue is not it's a petty issue or it's a minor issue, we shouldn't discuss about this issue, Shaykh al-Isla al-Hadith Amritsarī has said clearly that this is a fundamental difference between us and the Hanafis in particular, because the al-Hadith reject blind following totally. And the blind followers, they go to the opposite extreme, who say that blind following is obligatory, is wajib. The 8th point which the Shaykh mentioned is that all the evidences that can be found in the Quran with regards to obeying and following the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have obeying, which is ita'ah, and we have following, which is ittiba' of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are understood to give the understanding of restriction, which is hasr. So every single ayah we find in the Quran which calls to following the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or being obedient to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is understood to give us the meaning or the fahm of hasr, which is to restrict this obedience and following to only the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That no one other than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam should be absolutely followed. Meaning matbu', the one that should be followed absolutely, is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anybody other than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not to be absolutely followed. Whereas the Madhhabists say that for example, the Hanafis say that their Imam, who is known as Abu Hanifa, Nu'man ibn Thabit, should absolutely be followed. The 9th point with regards to the Shaykh is the reference of the narration of Musa alayhi salam. We found that the Shaykh, he had made a slip of the pen, that the Shaykh mentioned that the narration is in Bukhari, but rather we find that the narration is in Musnad Ahmad, and it is dhaif, it is weak. But we found that there are other evidences directly from the Quran, and we find from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that give us the same understanding. Gave us the understanding that only the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stands, and everything other than the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is abrogated. That the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came and abrogated all the rules and the regulations, all the issues relating to halal and haram. Either they were abrogated or it was confirmed by the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and whatever was false was openly refuted and manifested for the people. The Shaykh mentions on the 3rd point that the Shaykh once again highlights that the accepted principle that the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has abrogated all the previous scriptures. Some of the scholars use this as evidence to argue that only the Quran and Hadith are principles of the Sharia to be followed, and that ijma and qiyas are to be rejected totally. And those who accepted ijma said that the ijma is conditional and will only be accepted if it does not go against any ayah or hadith. Rather, it must be derived from the Quran and Hadith, or it is restricted to the era of the companions ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. So once again, the Shaykh said that those ayat of the Quran which make naskh of the previous sharias that can be found like in the Torah and the Injil that was followed before the Quran was sent, this in itself is evidence to show that only the Quran and Hadith is evidence. Everything else is secondary and not primary. And those who say that who don't accept ijma as a separate principle, they said that the ijma is only that ijma can only be accepted if it is in accordance to the Quran and Hadith, and also that the ijma is restricted to the era of the companions ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. And many of the high authority scholars of usul who accepted analogy as a fourth principle put down the conditions for it to be accepted. So those who said al-qiyas, those who said that analogy is a principle, first of all they said al-qiyas as-sahih. They added a second word, they said a sound analogy or a correct analogy. And they said that qiyas, which is other than ijtihad or which is part of an ijtihad, we can say that every single form of a qiyas is a form of an ijtihad, but not every single ijtihad is a form of qiyas. So they said that the Hanafi scholars, who are the main opponents of the al-Hadith, they put down 4 conditions for qiyas to be a sound analogy. So these again, the Shaykh mentioned one of them, and I mentioned all 4 of them, and he said that the example that they gave that was done as an analogy, or which is given by the Hanafis today, is the analogy that is made between eating garlic and onion and smoking. Although that we know that smoking is haram, according to us and according to the Hanafis, is makruh tanzi. Not makruh, but makruh tanzi. Makruh tanzi, according to the Hanafis, is something that if it is abandoned and not done, it is better. Whenever the word makruh is used by the Hanafis, by itself, then it refers to makruh tahrim. So the 4 principles were mentioned, or conditions that were mentioned for qiyas. The first being that the asal, which is garlic and onions, for example, in this circumstance or in this example, is not specifically specified with another textual proof. Meaning that when the Prophet ﷺ said that nobody should go to the masjid after eating garlic and onions, then the Prophet ﷺ did not restrict it only to garlic and onions. And secondly, there's another textual proof which proves that this has been restricted. So when you look at smoking, when they said that they made an analogy based upon garlic and onions with smoking, they found that this Prophet ﷺ did not restrict eating garlic and onions or going to the masjid, but anything else could be added for 2 reasons. The restriction cannot be found, and there is not another specific proof. This is known as the asl, meaning the garlic and the onions are known as the asl, and smoking is known as the far. Second condition which was put down is that the ruling be a ruling which is in accordance of it being an analogy, meaning that when the mujtahid derives this ruling of smoking, it has to be a qiyas, it has to be an analogy. It cannot be istinbat, or for him to make clear a hidden ruling that can be found within the text. It has to be a clear analogy. In this case, it's a clear analogy because nothing of the sort has been mentioned in the text with regards to smoking. He has made a clear analogy. It should not be modified or amended away from being a ruling that is not based upon analogy. So it's not istinbat where he derives the ruling, rather he has made an analogy. The third condition which the scholars of Hanafis have mentioned is that the Islamic ruling that is derived within this analogy should be based upon the exact same textual proof. For in this case, that they said that smoking is makruh tanzi because eating garlic and onions or going to the masjid, the Prophet ﷺ forbade us. In the very same way, smoking and going to the masjid is also prohibited, or also makruh, because it gives the same result, which is the illah, which is that it gives a bad smell or a bad odor. So the rulings are parallel. So this is what they said, that the Islamic ruling that is derived with this analogy should be based upon the exact same textual proof for the result of the new ruling and its ramifications, which is parallel to the original ruling, with the condition that there is no text in comparison to that ruling. So when they derive this ruling of smoking and not going to the masjid, there is no other text which contradicts this. That this new ruling does not go against any other text that can be found. After that, so the ruling of smoking is based upon the textual proof of onions and garlic, and there is no text that can be found that opposes and contradicts this new ruling, which was made by a mujtahid who made qiyas. The fourth condition is that the ruling that can be found in the asl, which is garlic and onions, after its reasoning, after its qiyas, causal justification, which is eating all onions and garlic and going to the masjid, after the new ruling, unprecedented with analogy, has had no impact or change upon the new ruling. So when you derive this new ruling with smoking and going to the masjid, this new ruling for smoking and not going to the masjid has not changed the original ruling. It did not have no impact, or it did not change, or did not modify or anything. That's the condition, that the asl ruling, the original ruling with garlic and onions, should be left untouched and unchanged. When these four conditions are met according to those who accept qiyas, then they say that that qiyas will be considered to be a sound qiyas or al-qiyas al-sahih. The 13th point is that the agreed position with all al-Hadith scholars is that if an analogy contradicts the Quran and Hadith, it will be rejected. So all the al-Hadith scholars are in agreement that any type of analogy that contradicts the Quran and the Sunnah is rejected. The reason being that the mujtahid or the scholar, his status is not that he has the authority or power to legislate in the Sharia. That's why his ijtihad is rejected when he does qiyas. In addition to this, his judgment goes against the Quran and the Sunnah. We can't accept a judgment of a mujtahid whose judgment goes against the Quran and Sunnah. If we do accept it knowing that his judgment goes against the Quran and Sunnah, then we have elevated his status by giving him that status of being an authority and that he has the right to legislate, which is not the case, because the only person who has the right to legislate through revelation was Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The 14th point is that the example of a mujtahid extracting an unclear ruling in an ayah is like Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 187. That if a person starts his fast in a state of impurity, but had marital relationship with the spouse before the true dawn, that this is permissible for him. That which can be derived is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to eat until the true dawn. And obviously, if a few minutes before true dawn, if he was engaged in a relationship with his spouse, that he would have not had enough time to make ghusl and enter his fast in a state of purity. So Allah has allowed and forgiven, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has permitted for a person. This was one of the examples that the Shaykh gave. The 15th point is that Shaykh al-Islam gives the reason of those who see analogy as a principle of the Sharia, that they argue that the only reason they use qiyas or analogy is that they regard it to be mudhir, which discloses and makes an issue which was unclear, and hidden apparent and crystal clear, and that's it. That's some who argue as qiyas as a principle, say this is the real objective of doing qiyas, analogy, to make a disclose and make an issue which was unclear clear. The 16th point which the Shaykh mentioned is that the agreed principle in theory with no dispute is that a mujtahid does not a legislative authority. The mujtahid is not a legislative authority, which makes him probable and possible to make mistakes and be wrong. The explicit proof for this is the ikhtilaf that can be found within the madhabs. So we have 4 famous madhabs: the Hanafis, the Malikis, the Shafis and the Hanbalis. When we look at the ikhtilaf between the 4 madhabs, then we look at the ikhtilaf found within each madhab. So we have the Hanafis differing in so many opinions on one mas'ala. We have the Malikis, we have the Shafi'is, and we have the Hanbalis. So this is all clear proof to show that the ijtihad of a mujtahid, it does not reach the level of it being a legislative authority. So this ikhtilaf that can be found within the madhab, such as the Hanafis, that the pillars of the madhab differed about 2/3 of their fiqh. So we have that the pillars of the Hanafi madhab are considered to be 3: Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, and Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani. They say that Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, who were the senior students of Abu Hanifa, they differed with Abu Hanifa in 2/3 of the total of Hanafi fiqh. So if the Imam's position is disputed and challenged, then obviously he cannot be absolutely followed. If the students of Abu Hanifa did not absolutely follow him, then those who come after him cannot be done. The reason why they did not absolutely follow him is because they did not give him that status of being absolutely followed. The 17th point and the last point of the lesson is that the previous lesson is that the judgments of the Imam should be weighed on the scales of the Quran and Sunnah, and not the other way around, that the Quran and Sunnah is researched to support his judgment. So this is what we find today. We find that the statements of the Imams become the asal, and the Quran and Sunnah becomes the far. So you find a statement of a mujtahid of an Imam, then you search for evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah to support that. It should be the other way. First, it should be the Quran and the Sunnah. Then the Imam's statement should be presented upon the scales to weigh and to see whether his statement is in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah, not the other way around. A summary of last week's lesson before we move on now. So like I said again, the method of studying is that I will say, when I read from the statement of Shaykh al-Islam, I will say Shaykh al-Islam al-Ḥadīth Amritsarī, and then I will say end of quote or end of speech. And then I will give my own ta'liqat or my own sharh to what the Shaykh said. Is everything clear and طيب?
Yes, it's inshallah.
So now we start today's lesson. Shaykh al-Islam al-Ḥadīth Amritsarī rahimahullah states, he says, Abu Hanifa, his famous statement is, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, that if there is a sahih hadith, then that is my madhab. And he also said, أُتْرُكُ قَوْلِي بِخَبْرِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, abandon my opinion if it opposes the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Based upon this evidence, the students of Abu Hanifa always followed this way. And this is the reason, ordinarily, that his students opposed him on many issues, and no one saw this differing or opposition to be bad. So when the students of Abu Hanifa did not follow their teacher in everything that their teacher did, rather we find that the later Hanafi scholars, on many occasions, because of the students of Abu Hanifa's position being strong, gave preference to their opinions and classified it as being the preferred opinion. Mufta bihi qawl, with regards to which I do not want to go in detail, or rather refer to my treatise on this subject known as Ijtihad wa Taqlīd wa Salafi. End of quote of Shaykh al-Islam al-Ḥadīth Amritsarī. So now my explanation. Shaykh al-Islam al-Amritsarī rahimahullah brings the statement which has been ascribed and attributed to Abu Hanifa. He said that Abu Hanifa said, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. That which is correct is that these statements attributed to Abu Hanifa, أُتْرُكُ قَوْلِي بِخَبْرِ رَسُولِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, then these statements have not been authentically established from him. There is no chain to prove that he made such statements. All of those who bring those statements and say that this is what Abu Hanifa said, there is no evidence in reality to say that Abu Hanifa said this. But it is present in the books of the Hanafis. So the Hanafis themselves, you can find this statement of Abu Hanifa in which he says, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. So when we quote them and our scholars quote them ilzaman, as proof from their books, to say that look, even in your books, your Imam, a statement of your Imam can be found where he said that إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. And this is what the Shaykh was referring to the book when he said Ijtihad wa Taqlīd wa Salafi, that the Shaykh has explained and dealt with this issue. The whole concept of the Madhabists is that the Madhabists always attack the Ahlul Hadith of saying that the Ahlul Hadith are disrespectful towards the Imams. They say this. The Shaykh refuted this and he said that if opposing an Imam, for example, Abu Hanifa is an Imam for the Hanafis, and we find that the pillars of the Hanafi Madhab, they opposed Abu Hanifa. If their opposition was not considered to be an insult, and if their opposition was not considered to be something bad, then when the Ahlul Hadith also abandon and reject and do not accept the opinions of the Imams, regardless of whether it's Abu Hanifa or anybody else, why is it that they are labeled as disrespecting, and why is it that they are labeled as being those who insult the Imams? This is injustice. Because just because you don't accept the opinion of a scholar does not necessarily mean that you insult him. And this is what the Shaykh was trying to say. The Shaykh further states, Shaykh al-Islam al-Ḥadīth Amritsarī says that this is exactly the madhab of the Ahlul Hadith, that no matter how great the scholars, even if he be an Imam, if his position opposes the Quran and Hadith, then it will be abandoned. And end of the Shaykh's quote. Zulfiqar say that this is the landmark of our madhab, that we do not blindly follow anybody. We compare the positions of the Imams with the Quran and Hadith. We do not compare the Quran and Hadith with the positions of the Imams, meaning that we present the statements and the fatwa and the opinions of the Imams on the scale of the Quran and the Sunnah. And Hadith is support, and not the other way, where we bring forth the Quran and Hadith in support of the statements of the Imams. Now somebody may ask this question: who is the one that will determine whether the scholar's opinion is in accordance to the Quran and Hadith or not? Obviously, we've given you a principle. One of the principles that is adopted by the Ahl al-Hadith is that the statements of the Imams, the fatwa of the Imams are presented on the scales of the Quran and Sunnah. Now, who is the one that is going to determine whether this statement of the Imam, this statement of the scholar, this statement of this mujtahid is in accordance to the Quran and Sunnah? This is a big question which everybody always asks. Who is going to say that this mujtahid is correct or incorrect? Who has such knowledge this day, today, who from amongst the people or from amongst the scholars has the same exact amount of knowledge to determine this? People always put this question forward. This is a question that is always debated amongst the people. Who has this knowledge? The layman cannot do this. Shaykh al-Islam al-Hadith Amritsarī, he gives the answer. He says the answer is simple. Shaykh al-Islam says the answer is simple. The experts on those issues will inform others who are considered scholars and have studied all the different sciences and its principles, like Nahw of the Arabic language. If an Imam made a statement in relation to Nahw and he got it wrong, a contemporary scholar living today will say that although he made a statement, this is wrong. If it was with regards to as-sarf, he will say as-sarf. If it was with regards to ilm al-ma'ani, which is semantics of the Arabic language. If it was related to ulum al-Hadith, then he will say that the Imam said this Hadith is sahih, or da'if, but in reality this is the situation. With regards to the layman, then they are like as it has been said. The famous statement they say with regards to the layman is al-awam kal-an'am. What do they say? They say al-awamu kal-an'ami, or al-awamu kal-an'am. They say, which means that the layman, that the lay people are like the cattle and the sheep. You know the cattle that you have. What happens when you have a herd of cattle? Let's go around wherever. So they just follow anybody. So this is the condition of the layman. And this was the condition of the layman of the past, the present, and the future. This will always be the case of the layman. So they have no knowledge. So they will ask the living scholars amongst them. So the layman in every single era, whether they were in the time of the Tabi'un, in the time of the Sahaba, in the time after that, in our time, and in the 100, 200 years ago, what will the layman do with regards to all this without determining? The layman only has one option, and the layman will only do one thing, and that is to go to the living scholars and ask them what is right and what is wrong. And whatever the living scholar, the answer that he will give is the answer that the layman will follow. Shaykh continues to say, so he says that al-awamu kal-an'am, the lay people are like the cattle and lost sheep. They just follow anybody. They have no knowledge, so they will ask the living scholars amongst them and refer back to them, because they have been commanded to do that as in the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Surah Nahl, ayah number 43. So ask the people of the message if you do not know. So the layman is like the cattle. They have no knowledge. The only option they have is to go back and refer back to the people of knowledge. The scholars with regards to the issues that they need answers to. So they cannot go back to the ancient mujtahids. So the mujtahidun and mutaqaddimun. So the layman cannot go and follow Abu Hanifa, because he doesn't know Abu Hanifa's position. He can't go back and follow Shafi'i. He can't go back and follow Malik. He can't go back and follow Imam Ahmad. He will have to follow who? The living scholar. Either the living scholar will say to him that this is the position of Malik, this is the position of Abu Hanifa, this is the position of Ahmad, this is the position of Shafi'i. So in reality, he is totally dependent upon who? Upon the living scholar. The dead scholars that are past, the mujtahidun that are past, or whether they are from the mutaqaddimin or the mutaakhirin, he has nothing to do with. He's just going to take their word for it. And this is what he will do. And even if they were to go back to them, then how is it possible to go back to those mujtahids who have died without going through an intermediary? So the Shaykh says, let's say for the sake of argument that you can go back to the scholars like Abu Hanifa. How are you going to go back to Abu Hanifa without having an intermediary? You will have to go back to all the scholars who will have narrated what Abu Hanifa did. So there's no way you can go and ask Abu Hanifa directly. So yes, so there is no way that without an intermediary, you can blindly follow your Imam. That's what the Shaykh says. So asking the present ulama is as equal as asking the ancient mujtahids, as they know their opinions and positions. So the Shaykh said, in reality, nobody is a Hanafi, is a Maliki, is a Shafi, is a Hanbali. In reality, he is what his local scholar is telling him. He's following and taking the word of his local scholar. He can't be really following Malik, Abu Hanifa, Shafi, or Ahmad. If Abu Hanifa has 4 opinions on that issue, and the living scholar takes one opinion, or follows the second opinion, or the third opinion, and tells him that this is the position of Abu Hanifa, how is he going to know that this is the correct position of Abu Hanifa? How is he going to know that this was the last position of Abu Hanifa? How does he know that this is the incorrect position of Abu Hanifa? He's going to take you by his word and say this is the position of Abu Hanifa. So the Shaykh said, nobody really follows Imams. Everybody follows living scholars. So because the mujtahid, his position and fatwa and opinion, without being in accordance to the Quran and Hadith, cannot be taken as proof and be followed, regarding which there is a consensus of all the scholars. The layman will ask the present living scholar about the opinion of the mujtahid, whether it is correct and authentic and in accordance to the Quran and Hadith. And then he will like, so he will go to some Maulana, he will go to some Mufti, he will go to some Shaykh, and we'll ask him, like, what's the issue on this? Is this halal or haram? So that Mufti will say to him, yes, this is correct. The Abu Hanifa was correct. Shafi was correct. Ahmad was correct. Malik was correct. So-and-so was correct. And you take his word and follow it. He doesn't know. And this is what really happens. This is what the Shaykh is saying. But the Shaykh is saying that we know that probability and that possibility that every single Imam and a Mujtahid is liable of either being correct or incorrect. So who determines this now? So in reality, everything is dependent upon the living scholars and not the past scholars. This is the Shaykh's argument. I.e., the mujtahidun mutaqaddimun, the ancient mujtahid, it is for this reason that the Hanafis have said it many times. Well, one of the Hanafi scholars said in their books, when they looked at this scenario and when they saw that this is the reality of the Ami, of the layman, that he just goes and asks, who? He goes and asks the Mufti, who he considers to be a Mufti, or he considers to be a scholar. He just goes and asks him. This is why Ibn Abidin al-Shami, who is known as Muhammad Amin ibn Umar ibn Abdul Aziz Abidin al-Dimishqi al-Hanafi, he says, what does he say in Arabic? He said, al-Ami la madhhab lah, bal madhhabuhu madhhab mufti. يرد المحتار على الضر مختار. He says, when you look at the reality, the waqi, Ibn Abidin al-Shami, Hanafi, who was a contemporary of Shaykh al-Islam Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah, from Damascus, said, he says that the layman in reality has no madhhab. He doesn't have a madhhab. Rather, his madhhab is the fatwa of Islam. That's his madhhab. He doesn't really be, he's not really a Hanafi. His madhhab is what he mostly says. This is the fact. This is nobody that can deny it. So, end of the Shaykh's speech, rahimahullah ta'ala, and Zulfiqar says that the living scholars in every era have an important role for the Muslims. The living amongst them, with regards to their expertise, will be asked questions to determine what is right and what is wrong. A scholar who is not known to be biased, or to be a blind follower, or a fanatic, or has favoritism towards a particular sect, must not be referred to. Rather, a sincere, just scholar who has taqwa and who gives his fatwa based upon the Quran and Sunnah is the one that should be referred to. This is the reality that we live in. When we say that, who from amongst the scholars should we refer to? Because the fact is that everybody refers back to the living scholars. Whether you reject Taqlid or whether you accept Taqlid, everybody goes back to the scholars. So what type of scholars should we refer back to? We should refer back to those scholars who are known to be experts. This scholar is known to be an expert in Hadith, then we should go back to that scholar in Hadith. If this scholar is known as the expert in Tafsir, then we should go back to that scholar in Tafsir. If this scholar is known to be an expert in buying and selling, and we should go to the scholar who is an expert on buying and selling. But the most important point is that this scholar who we go for our fatwa is a person who is known to be just, a person who is Sahib al-Sunnah, a person who does not cloud or does not give judgments based upon being biased or fanatic and blindly follow. Further, I say that the ayah that was used by the Shaykh is the ayah that is used to prove Taqlid. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. But in reality, this ayah is a proof against blind following. What is this ayah? It is an ayah which refutes blind following. And scholars such as al-Shawkani, and Shaykh al-Isla al-Dahlami, and Shaykh Badi'uddin Sindi al-Rashidi have in their books proved that this ayah in reality cannot be used as proof to justify blind following. Whereas Ahlul Dhikr is referring to the people of the scriptures. Ahlul Dhikr is referring to the people of Ahlul Kitab, the people of the scriptures. Dhikr, as we know, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. The Quran is also called the Dhikr. So Dhikr was the previous scriptures which the prophets and the messengers before Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Musa and Isa, received through revelation. Revelation is divine. Revelation is from Allah. And that revelation which is from Allah, you cannot blindly follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are making ittiba and ita of the Prophet and the Messenger that came before. And then the scriptures became corrupted. So when the scriptures became corrupted, Allah sent down His final book, falsified and clarified that which was the truth to be the truth, and that which was false to abolish it. So this ayah cannot be used as proof, because after that it says mil bayyinati wa zubur. Mil bayyinat means proof. They always quote the first part of the ayah and they don't continue after that. Mil bayyinat. Al-bayyinat is a proof which is higher than dalil. We have al-dalil, we have al-burhan, we have al-bayyinah, we have al-hujjah. These are all the different levels of the evidences, words that are being used with the Quran, burhan being the highest. So in reality, the layman has no madhab. So Shaykh al-Islam, ThanāʻAllāh Amritsarī rahimahullah Abu al-Wafa, he quoted this ayah because this is the ayah which the Muqallids famously quote. And we still see this day that they quote this ayah to try to justify blind following. Whereas blind following, this ayah does not support blind following, rather it refutes blind following. Because if you are told to ask the people of scriptures, people of the message, then the people of the message are those who received revelation. Revelation is divine, divine is pure knowledge, and following pure knowledge cannot be blindly following. Now, so in reality, the layman has no madhab. He is not even restricted to his blind following madhab. How many issues that we have seen the blind followers differ amongst themselves. The blind followers, we see that they say that if you blindly follow a particular imam, if you restrict yourself to a particular imam, then you will not be led astray. But we see the reality to be the opposite. For example, I'll give you an example, is the moon sighting issue. The moon sighting issue, those who agree to be Hanafis, those who agree to be upon the usul, those who agree to be blindly following, they differ with regards to international and local moon sighting. Also now in the past few years in England, because of the night being very short, the Hanafis themselves have differed when they should stop eating and do so. Some of the Hanafis have prayed their Fajr, have closed their fasts, and while the other Hanafis are still eating. So according to those who have closed their fast and prayed the Fajr, the ones who are eating the fast is void. And according to those who are eating and those who have prayed the Fajr, they are saying that they have prayed Fajr in the wrong time, and the time of Fajr has not started. Otherwise, why would they be eating? So we find in the issue of halal and haram, how many issues that we find in halal and haram that they are different. There is no consensus amongst them, whilst claiming to be blind followers, whilst claiming to be following the same fiqh, whilst claiming to be upon the same usul, but you find that they contradict one another. On one issue, there's 4 to 5 opinions sometimes. So we find this amongst the Hanafis. So the blind following layman is told that this is the position of his Imam Abu Hanifa. And then the opposite can be found by another mufti. So you find these muftis, they give fatwa. طيب. One mufti of a Hanafi madhab, being a Deobandi, will give one fatwa, and then another Deobandi mufti will give the opposite fatwa. And the same can be found with the Barelis, who claim themselves to be Hanafis. So not only being upon the same madhab, being upon the same usul, but also being upon the same cult. Deobandi or Bareli, you find this. So what does he do? Who does he follow? What is their action plan? So what do they say to their people now? You Hanafi, Deobandi, Mufti. They sits there thinks, alright, who am I going to follow now? When am I going to close my fast? 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock? What am I going to do? One is saying halal, one is saying haram. That cannot be right. One is saying it's haram to do this, and the other is saying it's halal to do this. The other is saying it's haram to do this, and the other is saying it's halal to do this. So who does he follow? What is the action plan? Saving him from following his desires. Because they say one of the fundamental reasons of why you have to blindly follow is that you don't follow your desires. So when Abu Hanifa has 4 opinions on one issue, which one is chosen? One mufti uses one, the other uses the other. So either the layman is absolutely following the living imam, or the living mufti, or the living scholar. So in reality, the layman is absolutely following who? He's following the living scholar. He's not absolutely following Abu Hanifa. But he can't be absolutely following his blind imam, because the blind following scholars differ so much amongst each other. So the people follow their blind following scholars absolutely, believing that they are blind following the imam absolutely. But in reality, what's happening is they're blindly following who? The living scholars. They're not blindly following the imam. And this is the reality. And this is what I have to say. And this is what's happening. So even the claim to follow your imam absolutely is impossible. Impossible. In reality, you are absolutely following who? The living scholar. Shaykh al-Islam, Rahimahullah, then continues and says, so the conclusion to what I have said is that every single Muslim's madhab is that no one other than the Messenger of Allah is to absolutely be followed. The Messenger of Allah is the only one who has the status and authority to legislate, and his words are proof and evidence. Other than him, even a noble companion, radiyallahu anhu, a tabi'i, or a mujtahid, or a scholar of hadith, everybody is equal in comparison to their statements being rejected or accepted based upon the criteria of the Sharia. A companion can also be wrong, radiyallahu anhu, with the lofty status that he has. a tabi'i can also be wrong. A student of a tabi'i can also be wrong. The scholars that come after them can also be wrong. The imams can also be wrong. If a sahabi, his mistake is accepted widely and easily, and nobody says that this is insulting the sahaba, and what about when you reject the opinion of a mujtahid or an imam based upon his statement contradicting the Quran and the Sunnah directly? Why is this considered by the ignorant ones and the fanatic ones to be insulting the Messenger of Allah? I'm sorry, to be insulting the imam or being disrespectful to the imam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now, so Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafa al Amritsarī rahimahullah mentions, he says that we have to understand that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the only one that is worthy of being followed and being obedient to absolutely. Everybody other than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no matter how great their status, even if they be a noble companion, even if they be a tabi'i, a student of a companion, and even if they are a student of a companion, and then they come after the first three generations, the best generations of al-Islam, their fatwa or their opinion will be weighed on the scales of the Quran and the Sunnah. And if it is in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, it will be accepted. And if it is not in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, it will be rejected. But as we know that every single mujtahid has a nasib. وَلِكُلِّ مُجْتَهِدٍ نَصِيب. وَالْمُجْتَهِد يُصِيبُ وَيُخْطِئ. That a mujtahid is either correct or incorrect. If he is incorrect, فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ وَاحِدٌ. If he is correct, فَلَهُ أَجْران. Then he will get two rewards, as mentioned in the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can say the criteria for this is a famous story that can be found with regards to which has been famously ascribed to Imam Malik rahimahullah. These words or these kalimat have been ascribed to Imam Malik rahimahullah, although before Imam Malik such statements were made by his predecessors, our predecessors like Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, and Umar, and Mujahid rahimahullah. What happened was that Imam Malik rahimahullah is teaching the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's masjid, and a man walked inside the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's masjid, and he had a question or a fatwa that he wanted Imam Malik rahimahullah to answer. So Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, this man came to Imam Malik and he asked a question. The students of Imam Malik rahimahullah were present. So after answering the question, the mustafti or the person who asked the question, he was not satisfied with the answer which Imam Malik rahimahullah gave. And he made this clear. When the students of Imam Malik rahimahullah saw that this man had come, he had asked the Shaykh a question, the Shaykh had answered, and he had not accepted the Shaykh's answer, they became angry. When Malik saw that the students of that his students had become angry, he said something in the Arabic language. He said, كُلُّ يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهُ وَيُرَدُّ عَلَيْهِ إِلَّا صَاحِبُ هَذَا الْقَبْرِ. He said that the saying of every single man that walks the face of this earth, walks on the face of this earth, will be accepted or rejected, except for this man in the grave. When he pointed towards the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the Madhhab of al-Hadith. Although this statement has been ascribed to Imam Malik rahimahullah famously, but those who preceded him in similar statements are the likes of Ibn Abbas and Mujahid, as we find that Bukhari has mentioned this way. He said, إِذَا ثَبَتَ الْخَبْرُ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَأَصْحَابِهِ فَلَيْسَ فِي الْأَسْوَدِ وَنَحْوِهِ حُجَّةٌ. قال ابن عباس ومجاهد ليس أحد بعد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا يؤخذ من قوله ويترك إلا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah narrated this author of Ibn Abbas in his Juz Qiraat Fatiha Khalf al-Imam, when Ibrahim al-Aswad said that you do not have to recite al-Fatiha behind the Imam in the loud prayers, Bukhari wrote this narration and said that when the statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being made clear, that no matter how much of a great status that you may have, even if it be the likes of Ibrahim al-Aswad and those similar to him, every single man's opinion will be accepted or rejected, except the opinion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Shaykh then continues to say, he says, considering the above, that a companion, a student of a companion, a student of a student of the companion, and all the scholars that come after them, from the golden era of al-Islam till this day, then something we have to take into we agree to is that the understanding, comprehension and knowledge of the people of knowledge is of different levels and degrees. Now, the knowledge that all these scholars have, we agree that their understanding, their fahm, and their understanding is of different levels. The meaning scholars are not all at the same level. Some scholars are more knowledgeable than the others. So we know that the status of a Sahaba is the greatest of all the scholars. Even those who came after them, the level of understanding and comprehension cannot be at the level of the Sahaba. So the people of knowledge are of different rank. Those who cannot understand complex and intricate issues, those issues are understood by the mujtahid. So amongst the scholars, you have those who are scholars and those who have reached the level of ijtihad. So the mujtahid is the one who is able to solve the complex and the intricate and difficult issues, whereas a normal scholar may not have the ability and the knowledge to do so. But even then, a mujtahid whose status is higher in comparison to the normal scholars, these mujtahidun, their status is such that they cannot legislate. They cannot legislate. In addition to this, those issues which have textual evidences, ijtihad is not permissible in those issues. So what does this principle mean? The Shaykh now brings a principle where he says that the principle which is agreed upon is la ijtihad ma'an nas. What is this principle? Is that there cannot be no ijtihad when there is textual proof. What does this principle mean? Its obvious conclusion is that first you will refer to the Quran and then the Hadith. And if you do not understand any issue, then you will consider the opinion and ijtihad of a mujtahid. The opinion and ijtihad of the mujtahid will be considered with the implementation of the principles of the Sharia. Quran and Hadith and ilm al-usul is found to be the predominant stance. So the Shaykh is saying, first thing you have to understand is a mujtahid cannot make ijtihad if there is textual proof. Secondly, that if you accept the ijtihad of a mujtahid, that ijtihad of a mujtahid will be only accepted when he implements that ijtihad based upon principles, and it is in accordance to the Quran and Sunnah, and it is considered to be a predominant opinion. It is rajih. This is the stance that will be adopted and acted upon. It is not specific or obligatory to specific people. This has been the madhhab of the Salaf and the Khalaf from generation to generation, that it is not to be considered to be insulting or disrespecting any imam. If it is, then no fiqh madhhab is free from the disrespect, as the blind following Hanafis of Abu Hanifa abandoned and do not accept the opinions of the three imams. And based upon this reality, the same applies to the blind followers of the imams. End of speech. So the Shaykh Rahimahullah here, he says that there is no ijtihad bin nas. This has been the madhhab of the Salaf and the Khalaf, the predecessors and those who came after them. That ijtihad will only be accepted when there is no nas, and that ijtihad has to be in accordance to the principles of the Quran and the Sunnah. And it is an ijtihad which is considered to be rajih, meaning the other scholars second that and say that now, this ijtihad of this mujtahid, we did not find any textual proof going against it. And the Shaykh said that if you reject the ijtihad of a mujtahid, if abandoning the ijtihad of a mujtahid is considered to be insulting and disrespecting, then when the Hanafis claim that they blindly follow Imam Abu Hanifa, they have abandoned and disrespected the ijtihad of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi and Imam Ahmad. Because they've rejected all their ijtihad. They've just restricted themselves to one mujtahid. And in the very same way, vice versa. The muqallids and the blind followers on the madhhabists of all the other imams, they do the same when it comes to Abu Hanifa. So if they are not considered to be disrespectful and insulting, then why are the Ahlul Hadith, when they do not accept the ijtihad of a mujtahid based upon the Quran and the Sunnah, they say because it contradicts the Quran and the Sunnah, they are considered to be those who reject the imams and disrespect the imams and insult the imams. I then continue to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in Surah Al-Mujadala, يَرْفَعُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ. That the level of the people of knowledge, as Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafas al-Amritsarī said, is of different levels and degrees. Evidence for this is Surah Al-Mujadala, ayah number 11. That Allah will raise those who are believed among you and those who are given knowledge by degrees. And Allah is the acquainted with what you do. So, people are being given knowledge based upon different degrees. The mujtahid, his degree of knowledge and rank is higher than the scholar. His ijtihad will only be acted upon if his ijtihad and opinion is considered to be predominant. And this is when it is in accordance to the Quran and Hadith and Usul. Disrespecting and insulting imams is a false slogan adopted by the fanatic blind followers when the ijtihad of the imam is not accepted due to it being contrary to the Quran and Hadith. Then Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafas al-Amritsarī rahimahullah says, he says, understand this issue. As we as Muslims have been commanded in the Quran and Hadith explicitly, mantuq, and there is a consensus amongst the Muslims that we are not allowed to follow the fit positions of the previous prophets and messengers unless stated in the Quran. So by abandoning their opinions, have we disrespected them or insulted them? وَلَمْ يَقُلْ بِهِ أَحْدٌ إِلَّا مَنْ سَفِهَ نَفْسَهُ. And the Shaykh says that no one has ever said this except for the one who makes a fool of himself. That just because our Sharia, the Sharia of Muhammad Rasulullah has abrogated the previous Sharia and has made halal and haram clear that was in the previous Sharias, we do not follow Musa and Isa. So by not following Musa and Isa alayhi salam, have we disrespected them? Have we insulted them? Does anybody say this? No. We have not followed their opinions based upon what? Based upon the Quran and the Sunnah. So if you do this for the prophets and the messengers and it is not considered to be an insult, why is it considered to be an insult when we do not accept the ijtihad of the mujtahids that go against the Quran and Sunnah? So this is what the Shaykh rahimahullah mentioned, that the Sharia of the previous nations has been abrogated. There were certain things that may have been halal or haram in the previous Sharia, and the ruling may be different to that which we can find in our Sharia. But we are not allowed to follow the Sharia of any of the prophets and messengers before us. In fact, we have come across the text that even if the prophets and the messengers were alive of that Sharia, they would have had to follow the Sharia of who? Of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now the Shaykh, he brings a last and final doubt. And he brings this doubt, and this doubt is probably one of the strongest doubt that is mentioned with regards to blind following. And then after this doubt, we shall end this chapter. Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafas al-Amritsarī he says, now listen to this great doubt. These blind followers, the madhhabists, bring to stop people from following hadith. They bring this doubt. The Ahlul Hadith, they say that they do not blindly follow the mujtahid, but they do because they blindly follow the scholars of hadith. So what happens is that the madhhabists, the blind followers, the muqallida, what do they say? They say that the Ahlul Hadith claim that they do not blindly follow the mujtahids, but the Ahlul Hadith, they do. They do blind follow. Who do they blind follow? They know that we, the muqallids, the madhhabists, blindly follow our Imam Abu Hanifa. And you, the Ahlul Hadith, you blindly follow Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, and Ibn Majah. Because you accept their verification of a hadith. If Albani says that this hadith is sahih, you accept what Albani says, So hence you are a blind follower of al-Ba'd. So they say that in reality that there is nobody on this face of this earth who is not a blind follower. If we're blindly following Abu Hanifa, then you're blindly following Abu Bukhari, you're blindly following Muslim, you're blindly following Abu Dawood, you're blindly following Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah. Shaykh al-Islam, rahimahullah, then he says that when we look at this doubt, in reality, those who bring these doubts are miskeen. He says these guys are masakin. And the Shaykh says, I do not blame them for bringing such a petty and stupid doubt. The blame is that these miskeen or masakin don't know or understand the madhhab of al-Hadith. If they understood the usul of al-Hadith, then they would have never had the audacity to bring such a foolish doubt. So now,